want. Yeah, do your thing. Test, test, test. We are recording. Works best if you go right above it.
Okay.
Just keep that in mind. Okay, we're going to jump right in here. Okay. We are at Sunnyside Cemetery, is that right?
Yes.
Is that what this is called?
Sunnyside, yes.
Very cool. And I know it's a cemetery in Long Beach. A lot of history here. A lot of big tombstones and headstones. Looks like something out of like the Haunted Mansion, right? It's very traditional.
Right. It's
And
a huge historical, sacred plot of land here.
feels very sacred. Feels very solemn, right?
Yeah.
Very important. Mm.
Absolutely. You know, they were talking about closing the gates here.
Really?
Yeah. But the city's taking Sunnyside over. If you look right across the fence, just straight, you see all the grass over there is green.
Yeah.
That's because the city took that cemetery over and they water it all the time. So this one's going to be getting some more love again.
Good. Yeah, because
Yeah.
not to be mean, but the grass leaves a little something to be desired.
Well, it's
That's all
mostly
right.
dirt
It's
and
mostly
lots
dirt.
of gopher holes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy that I got this far. Before we go further, though, I should introduce you. Your name is, of course, Maggie St. Thomas. I'm
Yes.
joined today by Maggie St. Thomas. And what do you do for everybody out there in a nutshell? I know you do many things, but
Okay.
how would you describe yourself?
Well, let's see. I think for this segment, I
Yeah.
do photography. I write, and I have a publication that has risen from the ashes. I guess is that what you call it?
It's appropriate enough, and we're here to
Right.
talk about it, right?
Yeah. So I have that too.
Jerk of all trades,
Jerk of
of
all
course,
trades.
is what you're talking about, your zine.
Right.
That's awesome. Tell everybody about the zine. What is that zine about?
Mostly about music and art, and there's entertainment. There's a section that honors the deceased.
Very cool.
Yeah, when the first issue was published in 2011, it had a photographer by the name of Edward Culver on the cover. And it also had a whole entire section of, there was like an RIP section for Timothy Leary, for Joey Ramone, for Bradley Knoll. And there was Etta James included also. And I just pretty much put it together because I had acquired such a library of photographs with so many incredible artists and not always had a publication to work with or backing me to publish them. So I started my own.
So you said you've amassed like a bunch of photos. So is it fair to say you've been in the game photo biz wise and music wise for a while?
My first published piece was in 1994, and that was in Angry Thoreau magazine. It was a 2-page spread. And as far as photos, negatives, I have a safe that is just full of negatives, and there's
very cool
over 40,000 in there.
That is insane to think
They're
of that
in
you've
books.
got that many.
Right. They're in books, and they're categorized alphabetically. So I can pretty much go in, pick up the color that I know it would be, and just flip through them and find it in the sheet and print file. I use a lot of print file, and scan it, print it, whatever I need to do. But yeah.
And like, who are in some of these photos? Because I think I first met you outside of Third Eye Records on the street, and you were there.
Yeah.
You were there promoting Jerk of All Trades, and I think I got a T-shirt and the first issue of Jerk of All Trades.
Yeah.
Or first issue for me, I should say.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
and
I gave you a sticker too.
you gave me a
right?
sticker. You were awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, like it was awesome to see. You had a lot of really good photos there. You were there with, can't think of her name. I'm so sorry.
There was Mercedes Hart and Jessica Moncrief.
Thank you,
and-
Jessica Moncrief.
Right.
Shout out to her. She is awesome. She actually.
And Mercedes Hart. They're both great
They're.
artists.
I don't remember Mercedes, but I imagine if you promote for her or vouch for her, she's got to be a pretty cool person because you're into pretty cool stuff.
She does these hand done Guadalupes, and they are amazing. She takes a little.
Yeah.
She engraves with paper. I'm not sure, but they look really cool. I actually purchased 2 of them, and they're in my bedroom. They're beautiful pieces, and I know other people who have some of her work as well.
Yeah, she probably is. I can imagine. I have a ton of respect for any artist, but especially you guys. Like you and Jessica were out there with all your photos, and it was inspiring to see. Like you have seen some really talented and met some really incredible people. Who are some of the most notable people you think you've ever gotten to photograph?
Well, I'm always going to go with the Ramones when it comes to that.
Rad, yeah.
You know, I got into photography because of the Ramones, and it was my dream to meet them, but not just as a fan, to kind of have a different tool in a sense. Not an instrument, but, you know, I had a camera and a pen, and, you know, and I met them and photographed them in '95.
How'd you meet them?
It was at the K-Rock Weenie Roast.
Rad.
It was the 3rd annual K-Rock Weenie Roast in June of '95. And Arturo Vega, who was the Ramones creative director, got me a photo pass. And
Very cool.
that was when I first started. You know, I literally just, I got in with that. I interviewed them. I was supposed to interview Johnny Ramone a second time, but he unfortunately passed away about 2 weeks before that interview was going to take place, and that was also going to be arranged again by Arturo.
That's
on that.
insane. And so where did you told me before we got started, you grew up in Michigan, right?
I was born in Michigan, yes.
Right on. And how long did you live there?
Not very long,
Yeah.
but when I go back, I mean, I have traveled there before,
Yeah.
and I used to go there a lot more than I do now. But I used to go there at least once a year for a couple of years there. But
So where do you say you grew up? Like if someone were to ask you.
definitely California.
Yeah.
Yeah, Orange County. I live in Long Beach now. I had my kids in Long Beach.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So you identify with like Long Beach, Orange County, and when you grew up out here, did you ever envision yourself actually becoming a rock journalist and photographer? And did you ever think that was an actual possibility? I mean, what finally gave you the courage to reach out and ask for press passes and stuff like that?
Well, I always wanted to be an artist ever since I was, you know, I still have artwork that I did and schoolwork that I did from kindergarten that my father saved. And it would say, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Mhm.
And I put artist. And it's just, arts have always been engraved in me ever since I was a young child, listening to symphonies and great compositions, as well as, you know, a lot of film, and becoming familiar with a lot of artwork and museums and books and literature. Music, definitely. Lots of music.
Were your parents like super into the arts as well?
Yeah. Well, I was raised by my father, and he was always into, you know, there was always a record on with rock music, Hawkwind, Johnny Thunders.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, or it would be Wagner. You know, it just depends.
Very cool.
Depended, yeah.
Nice balance.
Yes.
And like, so did you, I know, are you a musician at all for people that don't know?
As a hobby, I do play the violin and I do play the cello. As
Pretty-
a hobby.
It's pretty complicated things to have as hobbies. It's pretty cool though.
Yeah.
And how long you been playing those?
Since I was 8 years old.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And is your father a musician as well, or?
You know what? He did work with film, like documenting a lot of the music from the 90s, anarchy punk bands, goth bands.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, and I would just go with him to concerts and stuff. And, you know, that's how I sort of picked up the camera. And once I picked up the camera, violin and, you know, all of that just went out the door. I was just in love with the camera and playing with that and taking photographs. And, you know, whether it was a 24 exposure roll of film or a 36 roll exposure of film, you know, it's just always been something I love.
Very cool. And were your parents pretty supportive of it from the beginning?
I'd say, yeah. I mean,
with your dad documenting rock and roll, I imagine he was probably pretty stoked when he started to see what you were doing, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Very cool. And what about your mom? Was she super into music too?
My mother was a big fan of AC/DC.
Hell yeah.
And, you know, she liked AC/DC a lot. I wasn't raised by my mom, so I didn't really, you know, I started talking to her again when I was 17, and then I met her, I guess, whatever you'd call it, when I was 23.
Okay.
And at the time I was working with the magazine. She was very supportive of that, very proud, and told a lot of, you know, everybody.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun. And then she passed away, like, you know,
Sorry
let's
to hear
see.
that.
That was 2005. So I had from 2002, the summer of 2003, the summer of 2004, the summer of 2005. Wait, that seems like a lot longer than it was.
So it was a very brief relationship.
Very brief. But we had that moment, and that was...
That's still pretty cool, right?
Very cool. Very cool.
Hell yeah. And that's awesome that both your parents got to experience, you know, seeing you rise to that success. Because, you're kind of underselling it, I feel. Like, you've taken some photos of really, really amazing people that, like, people have only dreamed to be in front of. You know, like, I know you've taken photos of Snoop Dogg.
Many
right?
times, yeah.
Like, you've talked to Snoop Dogg.
Oh, yeah. I've talked with him, yes.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And that's so rad. Like, not everybody gets to do that. That's so cool that you were able to arise to that from just a kid going to, like, concerts with your dad. Do you remember the first concert you ever went to?
Well, I do remember a concert. It wasn't the first one, but the first one that I remember, I was 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with my father, and we snuck in to go see Motorhead.
Oh,
and
such a good one.
Oh, my gosh, it was great. And then in 2006, when I was in Wisconsin,
Yeah.
Lemmy was playing with this rockabilly band called Headcat, and it's Slim Jim Phantom, Danny B. Harvey, Slim Jim from the Stray Cats.
Very good.
Danny B. Harvey, who's played with a bunch of, you know, he's a great musician. And it was also... Lemmy. And I told him, he was in my hotel room, actually. We were doing an interview, and I said...
That's cool.
He was looking at this book with the Ramones in it that I have some pictures in. I actually have a chapter. It's an Italian import, and it's called Blitzkrieg, Ramones, Rock and Art, something like that. It's an Italian import. There's an Italian chapter, and then there's an English chapter. It's great. And he was looking at, he's like, oh, yeah, Joey Ramone. And I'm like, you know, you were my first concert that I saw was Motorhead. And he's like, oh, yeah. And I said, and my father and I snuck in. And he's like, he gives me a nod of approval. He's like, oh, it's true rock and roll. And I'm like, yes.
Right from the beginning. And you got the approval of the artist.
Yeah.
So cool.
And then we took a photograph together, and it was awesome. I still have that. And I kissed his skin tag. You know, in the picture, the top
funny.
one.
Well, I'm sure you gave him a couple extra years with the good luck, right?
He was, that
was he a nice guy?
Very, very nice, very cool, great musician, man. His whole style. That was a bummer to lose him. I was sad, you know?
A lot of people were sad. I mean, Lemmy, I feel like the legend of Lemmy goes that he was a very grizzled person on the outside, but incredibly sweet on the inside. I've heard this over and over. I've never met him, but I've heard this in many interviews that that was the kind of person he truly was. He was a kind-hearted, good-spirited guy, just kind of minded himself.
Well, one of the first bands that I photographed was his first band, Hawkwind.
Mm-hmm.
They stayed over at our house in like 89, I think it was, 1989. And they were on one of their tours. So they stayed, and I was actually going to be a little robot and dance with Hawkwind.
Cool.
But I got sick. I didn't find out at the time. It took a couple years of more, I got sick, and I tried to take NyQuil, and I broke out in hives.
Oh, wow.
And so I couldn't be the little robot. So I was just like at the show at Bogart's and Club Lingerie and stuff, just totally like miserable. But I took some photographs of them, and that was pretty cool. And that was actually Lemmy's first band.
And even back then, they were super nice people, down to earth, I imagine. Or
Yeah. They're from Europe, They're a really trippy, great band. I grew up listening to them,
Yeah.
So.
I understand. Are there other bands do you think that are really near to you? Motorhead, the Ramones. Is there anything like other bands that like really identify or define who you are?
I would say I'm influenced by all kinds of artists and musicians, but
that goes into kind of our next thing. Yeah, what are your inspirations and influences for everything, photograph-wise, music-wise, life-wise?
Well, I would say that I'm incredibly influenced by the photo work of Diane Arbus. And she has the infamous photograph of the twins, the Shining girls. That's her picture. Like she photographed them, and the boy in the park with the grenade. And she did a lot of photography work of people with abnormalities, and would go into their homes and sit down with them and take a picture. And her work is incredible. I became familiar with her when I was like 14 years old by a documentary I watched that featured her daughter Dune Arbus. And her work is, I love it. I also grew up watching a lot of the films of Leni Riefenstahl, who did some amazing... She was an actress, producer, filmmaker, photographer. And she did like some powerful films, controversial woman, because of some of the content that she featured. But her images, nonetheless, are powerful, and that's what I'm drawn to. Women in film, so those two.
How would you describe your own work? Like, is there something you strive to achieve overall, like a theme that you think seems to come up a lot? Or like a intent that you always seem to carry out? Like, are you trying to be in the moment? Or is there a certain attitude you're trying to capture?
I'm not sure. There's been so many different subjects and layers to it throughout the years that I can't really say,
Like when you take a photo, do you approach a scene with some sort of intent, or do you just kind of let the moment happen and see what happens in the moment? Does that make sense?
Well, I do a lot of photography work with people.
Yeah.
So when I approach a person, I want to have a connection with them, which is very hard to do sometimes when you're doing live concert photography, because that person is giving a piece of themselves to that entire space. So when you have, a subject in front of you and you're taking a photograph of them, I want to make sure that they know that I'm there, that it's done with permission, as it always is. I always get permission. And the only time... Okay, so recently I was doing a photo shoot I was invited to photograph this vigil for this man who had been shot that day. It was a gang-related shooting in South Central LA around, a week after Nipsey Hussle had been shot.
Mm.
And I was invited to come down, and one of my friends asked me if I would be there and take some photographs, and I gladly went down there. And to be there in that realm of these women that did not know me, and they are mourning the instant loss of their child from that day. I mean, I feel like whoever I'm sitting in front of, if I'm taking a photograph of them, they are giving me more than I'm giving of myself, because that is forever. And I have some incredibly striking images of the mother of her son who was murdered that day. She's looking right at me, and I remember one of the girls was saying, "Don't ask. You're okay. You're one of us, and just take your pictures." And so I thought, okay, they're right, because I don't want to offend anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And she's looking right at me, and there's so much love, and I'm getting a little emotional right now just thinking about it.
Okay.
But it's beautiful. It really is.
So it's important for you. I mean, you said despite what those people are telling you to just take your photos, it's important for you to have them know that you're there and you're connected and you're sharing that experience with them, right?
Yeah, it has to be something that that they want,
Right.
that they're okay with,
Yeah.
In that type of sense, it was so intimate and personal. And, I almost felt like I shouldn't be doing that because it was so real.
Yeah.
But honestly, it was just such an incredible experience to be there, to be at Nipsey Hussle's vigil, to be, I've done a lot of vigils this year. I've done a lot of protests and photographed Angela Davis this year, which was...
That's incredible.
Yes.
That's insane.
Yeah, I love her. I do.
Man, that's like such a historic thing to be a part of. Like, I can't imagine how overwhelming that was. Like, did you get to meet her at all, or like talk to her at all, or get to see her talk at all?
Oh, absolutely. As
Yeah.
far as meeting her, hi Angela Davis, I'm Maggie St. Thomas.
Right,
No,
it is
that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I did get to photograph her,
Yeah.
and that was in February. And I had already photographed the Kingdom Day Parade
Yeah.
in LA, and I met some amazing people there, some great organizations. Ceasefire is one of them, the Reverence Project. One of my good friends I met that day at the Kingdom Day Parade, Kat Parkins, she invited me up on the float. So here I am on the float. Bobby Brown is in front of us. I'm
That's
on
awesome.
this float. Behind us is Power 106. I am going through South Central LA and getting some of the realest, rawest photographs that are just like, they're so, I can't help but have a feeling when I see them. And that's what I'm interested in getting when I photograph somebody.
Those are real raw moments.
The moment, to capture
Yeah.
that feeling, so it's not just a photograph and have it be flat. It moves. It's
It has a
alive.
story.
It has a feeling.
Right.
That's my goal.
That's very cool. And that's, I think, the mark of a good artist, is that you realize like there's got to be more than just the imagery. It's so much more. And I think it comes through in a lot of your photos. Like, I haven't seen your whole portfolio, obviously, but what I have seen, I can see like you do have a good sense of being in the moment. Like, every photograph feels real.
So which
That
ones
makes
have you
sense.
seen? Which ones do you like? Like, which one do you have a feeling with?
I saw you take photos at the Nipsey Hussle vigil, and that seemed really crazy and real because it looked like you shot on like maybe like a 50 millimeter lens, because it felt like you were in the moment. I remember there's one with like the crowd around, right? And like I just remember feeling like you're standing there witnessing this moment in time, which admittedly I didn't know the brevity of the situation. I think when I first heard that Nipsey Hussle, I assumed he was just like a rapper was died, but I didn't know the backstory. When I found out like what he had done with gangs and
Oh, he was
essentially
so much.
uniting, he was way more than just music,
Right,
right?
right.
Like
He did so much for the communities and for people and inspiring people. And I mean, died, and it was like, what?
yeah,
And everyone went nuts because of the timing too. It was absolute chaos. Absolute chaos in the community everywhere, you know, and
Yeah.
people didn't have to know him. That's when they were learning of him, and most importantly, his message. He was,
like his biggest thing was that he worked to unite people that were in gangs and stop violence, right? Like he was trying to unite rival gangs to work together to like look over the community and not kill each other and not be violent thugs.
right.
I imagine, or from what I do know, it seemed like that was like a lot of his message, right?
Well, he
that's
he
fair?
approached everything with such finesse and with such an amount of respect, and people really felt that. You know, there's no mistaking that he had such an impact.
Yeah. So do you think like community and civil rights and stuff like that, is that something that influences you majorly in your day-to-day life, or
Absolutely. I mean, just anything for the betterment of, you know,
society?
yeah.
I feel you. Was super into like the Beat Generation and civil rights movement and stuff like that back in high school, and I know that personally, like that's a huge thing that influences me to this day. Is like everything I do, I want ultimately to affect society in a positive way,
Right.
like you say,
Yeah.
not add to the chaos or the negativity.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's too much of that naturally occurring anyway.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, so do you have any other hobbies besides, like, do you do any hobbies outside of photography and outside of doing what you do?
Hi, Mike. How are
Hello.
you? Okay. Perfect. Thank you. A
Podcast. A podcast? Yeah.
Oh,
Just
I wanted
interviewing
to
her.
say, thank you, by the way, because I was able to find that girl that I came here looking for. She was at Forest Lawn, and I took some photos and sent them to to her sister. And they were so happy and so thankful about that. Yeah. So thank you. I was able to find her. They at first said that she wasn't over there. They had to keep going because everything's written. Yeah. Right. I made them go back twice before they finally said, with your persistence, we were able to find her. So that was good. Thank you so much, Mike. See you later. He's so sweet.
It's so cool. I forgot that you volunteer here for a second.
Is
And I was like, oh man, she's just talking shop with the other funeral guy.
yeah.
And
Oh,
what-
he's awesome.
Yeah.
That's Mike Miner. He's been here. He has family that's buried, and he's so sweet. Him
Yeah.
and Linda and Joyce too. They're really great people.
It's so cool.
And they've done so much for this cemetery.
How'd you even get into that? Like, what led you to volunteer here, you think?
Well, speaking of the community, I
Yeah.
saw that, they needed some help. I
Yeah.
read something online that said that the Sunnyside Cemetery was in jeopardy. And so
Yeah.
I wanted to help however I could. I have, I worked as a pre-need funeral counselor and
Mhm.
helping people get their wishes on file, plan their memorials, cremations, traditional burials, whatever they have. I also went to school in 2017 to become a crematory operator, which I'm licensed to do until 2023.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Juan Cias, I believe, does that. He was on one of our other podcasts.
Oh, cool.
Comedian
Yeah.
and buddy, also works in mortuary science.
I've seen his name. Very cool.
Yeah, it's you guys, I'm sure, would get along. It's so funny that they're like everybody has their own world, You know what I mean? Like
Right?
people that work in an office have their own world and lingo. People that work in cemeteries have their own words and lingo, and
Yes.
it doesn't matter what you do. Like you've got your own version of insider knowledge. It's funny.
Yeah.
Um, all right, sorry, we got way off, but that's the great thing
That's
about this
okay.
podcast is it's
Yeah.
a free form or free flowing discussion. You know, we can talk
Cool.
about anything. You never know where it'll go, but it's probably going to be really interesting. We're wrapping up, so before we get going, just have a couple more things. If you could go back in time and like give yourself some advice when you were younger that you think would be helpful in like your journey of becoming you, does anything come to mind you think that you might tell yourself, or maybe even someone out there needs some sort of inspiration, something you found particularly wise or helpful?
You know, I would just say to most importantly, I mean, the thing is, I could say anything, but would I have listened? You know,
Right, yeah.
But if I'm going to say anything to kind of absorb or you know remember, you just really got to believe in yourself, and
Yeah.
sometimes that is so hard to do. But you just got to do it, you know, because it doesn't matter like what's going on. And it really doesn't. It's all in your mind, really. Our minds are so powerful.
It's true. Perception is reality.
Oh man, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a matter of really, you got to believe in yourself. And people can knock you down and kick you while you're down. Believe it or not, there's people who like to do that kind of stuff.
Especially when you're pursuing your dreams and trying to like make things happen.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not everybody wants you to.
Right.
It's all right though. You move on. You keep going despite them, right?
Exactly, and that's what you got to do. It doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down. Doesn't matter. You just got to get back up.
That's right.
You know, and that's all you can do. You got to. That's all that can be done. You know.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Maggie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and interviewing. Before we go, is there one particular song that's very meaningful or memorable to you that you want everybody out there to go look up? Anything that comes to mind?
One song.
Yeah, not to put the pressure on.
Wow. Well, gosh, there's many one songs. The first thing that comes to mind is always the Ramones, you know, but really like how do you define just one song? Like Jimi Hendrix, oh my gosh, this is a sign. Little Wing.
There you go. Is
Little
it the flock
Wing.
of birds fly over the headstones in front of us?
Yeah, and that's actually the
Appropriately
song
enough.
that I have set up for my cremation
Yeah?
is Little Wing.
Lonely Planet Boy. That's a great song. That's my song,
It's playing
though.
in my head. Yes. For your love. Whoa, 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 yeah.
Yeah, I know. I love that song.
He was such a great musician, man. He died at 38, you know.
Really? That's young.
Yeah. He died at 38.
I didn't realize
So
that
did
was that.
Corey Haim. Corey Haim
Corey
was
Haim
38.
was 38? I thought he was
Yeah.
younger than that for some reason. It's crazy to think of. Like, I thought he was, like, in his prime in, like, his mid-20s.
No, he
Like-
was in his prime much
Yeah.
early. Well, I mean, he did all those great films.
He had a long
The
streak.
Lost Boys
yeah.
is that
was
is such a
great
good.
one, yeah.
Yeah, I just talked to Corey Feldman the other day. He's got some new work coming out that he wants me to photograph for him.
Cool.
Yeah, I've been working with Corey since '98. I actually photographed him and Haim
Yeah.
in '98. So they did an autograph signing, and I was there photographing them. And that was really cool because I grew up. I mean, hello, who didn't? You know,
it's
all
like
their
meeting
films
the
were
Breakfast Club. You know, it's like
Yeah.
what icons. So is he a pretty awesome dude?
They both were. Corey
Yeah.
Feldman is really cool people.
Seems like a nice guy.
He is.
Seems
He's
like-
very genuine.
Yeah, it seems like he's very
And that's rare, you know?
surface level. What you see is what you get, probably.
That's exactly. Yeah. He's very cool people.
All right, on. All right, well, Maggie, I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you so much for being on this podcast. Is there anything you want to promote before we get going? Check out jerkofalltrades.org.
Yeah, check it out. You know, it's a little platform for artists to get their name out, their work
this is going to
out.
be on there, by the way.
Cool.
Yeah, so
I'm excited. I'm excited. I really am. Because I've seen a lot of the stuff that you've done.
Thank you.
And, you know, I always want to support my friends and I want to see more of it. I'm sorry I wasn't able to make it at the Alex's show. How was that, by the way?
It's okay. Last one was awesome. Joe Sib was great. All
Yeah.
the comedians were great. Juan Cias, Monty Franklin, Anthony Davis. The staff was awesome. Crowd was awesome. It really was like such a perfect night. So, it was like maybe one of the best ones, if not the best one yet. And I can't wait for the next one.
When is the next one?
Don't know yet for sure.
Okay.
I will mention this now, though. I do have a date that you guys should be aware of. It's going to be the very first show I'm co-producing in Hollywood, and it's going to be December 28th at the Fourth Wall Comedy Cafe. So, give you more on that soon. If you follow me on social media, check that out. More on that soon, though. I don't want to announce too much of that yet.
Who took the photographs? Because they were really nice.
Oh, our photographer so far has been Kaylin Barnum. She
Okay.
does a great job.
Yeah, the
If
lighting,
you're out there,
colors, everything looked really good.
that's
on
what I was
it.
telling her. Her exposures are perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah, like
Flawless.
yeah, and like her white balance is always perfect. Like there's no issues with the warmth or anything. Everything just feels very harmonious, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like she does a great job. Yeah, but I will keep you all posted on the next date of things. Just follow me on social media. And you know, I haven't mentioned it yet, but I have a little playlist on there. If you go to my website, DannyFrankComedy.com,
What are you playing?
well, go to Danny Vision. There's a little link on there. It is a playlist that I've put together of tons of videos on YouTube, rare interviews, musical performances,
With who?
stand-up, all kinds of people. Rare documentaries about, comedians in L.A., obscure comedians from 2002 to 2014.
I love comedians.
Get lost in that playlist. I haven't talked about it enough. I've been slowly building it.
There's a
Go to
comedian by
Danny
the
Vision.
name of okay, hold on. Why'd I do this? Zach Miller. He goes by, well, that's his name. Are you
Yeah.
familiar with him?
Yeah.
He's so funny. I remember I was sitting down with another comedian, Rob Jurgensen,
Mm-hmm.
and Zach and Rob. We were all having a conversation, and I just looked at him and I said, typical Maggie fashion, just to kind of blurt something out that's just, to other people, but to me it makes perfect sense. I said,
Yeah.
if you were a superhero, what would your name be? And he says, oh, I never really thought of that. Let's see, if I was a superhero, I'd be Hebrew Thunder. And I'm like, fuck yeah, you would
That's
be.
so
I was
rad.
like, Hebrew Thunder needs a cape. Dude, you need a cape. And he was like, oh yeah, what are you going to make me one? I'm like, as a matter of fact, I am. So I made Hebrew Thunder a cape, and he totally had this whole costume thing
That's so funny.
down. You know what I mean? And it was hilarious. He totally went on with that for a good minute. I don't know if he's still, doing that in his sets or not, but it was hilarious. And
Well, if you're out there, keep an eye out for Hebrew Thunder
yeah.
coming to a club near you soon.
Oh, it's great. It's good stuff, man. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much for being on,
Thank
Maggie.
you.
Thank you so much. Good meeting you. Good seeing you. I'm glad that I met you guys on the street that one day. Truth be told, thank you for you and Jessica Moncrief. You gave me my very first hosting job ever. That was the very first time I had ever hosted a show. Probably should have said something, but I didn't, and I'm sorry about that.
Wait,
But yeah,
when?
That show at Harvell's. That was the first time I'd ever hosted.
Oh,
Ever. Yeah.
really?
I performed a bunch, but I'd never hosted a whole show. So that
No
was my
way.
first time.
No way.
Swear.
That was fun.
It was a lot of fun. And
Are you going to do more shows there?
I don't know. Hopefully. I got to go talk to John Benitez. Or I think Sam Tripoli does a show there now too. But no, that was a lot of fun. Thank you to you. Thank you to Jess Moncrief.
Oh, well, she's the one. She does
produced
all of
the whole
that
thing,
with Harvell's. Yeah. I've only been there, a couple of times. There was a street, what was it again? The Sidewalk
Project.
Right.
Awesome people. They sponsor the Long Beach Laugh-In, actually.
Yeah.
Go check them out, too. Very rad organization of people out there. Just kind of interacting with the houseless community. Doing art, playing music.
There was a guy
creating
from
a
No
bond.
Effects there, right?
Fat Mike was there, yeah. That was crazy.
There was a show that I did in 2015 in Huntington Beach.
Yeah.
It was called the Anarchy Show.
Yeah.
And it was as though all the artists there had Monets. They had
Yeah.
security.
Yeah.
They had they went all out on that show. And it was really, really cool. It was myself, John Gilhooly. Who else showed there? But No Effects, they had something from No Effects. And then they had an artist who tried to take one of Edward Culver's pictures and do something with their own art. And I didn't even know until I saw it. And I'm like, they were making a big deal about it. Like, hey, you can't take someone else's artwork and say it's your own. And that's absolutely true. There's so many people who try and do that, though.
Yeah, and it's such a weird thing
Ridiculous.
to talk about with, the whole Shepard Fairey thing. I don't know if you remember that, but, he got in some heat because, he created that Obama change iconic photo, the graffiti-looking propaganda hope thing for Obama. But that was all based on a photo that someone else had taken that he never gave credit to.
Yeah, that's not cool,
it's
man. That's not cool.
That's tough.
Yeah.
Because it's a fine line between, being influenced by something and, directly stealing it.
And so many people will do that. And all kinds of people.
Unfortunately.
Gene Simmons' son did that where he...
Really?
Yeah, where he came out with this comic book years ago, a couple years ago. And I mean, dude, what do you have to do that for? I mean, you can't come up with your own work. You got to steal someone's stuff. So much down to it was exact, but it was turned a little to the right. That's still stealing.
That's
traced. The whole image was the same. It's like taking a photograph.
Yeah.
And then just moving it a little, cropping it 5 degrees to the right and saying that's
not enough. Yeah, it's not original.
all of the artwork in there. He plagiarized a Japanese artist.
Oh man,
and that
tough.
sucked because I really wanted to like him too.
As the son of anyone from Kiss, you have high expectations on you. Immediately, you got to be pretty cool.
Well,
you
just
can't be
in
messing
general,
around by being a crappy artist.
It would just be great if, in general, people were all able to maintain a level of integrity. And, it's rather than having to resort to that, there's so many other things you can do. And I've seen my photographs being sold on T-shirts, shoes, skateboards, all kinds of stuff. And I will contact the person and say, hey, how did you get a hold of that picture?
Yeah.
And they'll say, oh, well, I bought the rights from this guy. And I'm like...
that you've never met or heard
I'm
of
like,
that
hey,
doesn't exist.
You're technically stealing from a child because that's a photograph that I did when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And, and they're making all kinds of money, and here I am, struggling to pay my rent, and it shouldn't.
Meanwhile, you see your photo on a skateboard in a window, right?
Yeah,
going for 100.
It was on these T-shirts, a Sublime picture. It was on these T-shirts with lyrics
that sucks.
of a song. It looked pretty cool, but it just wasn't cool. And of course, and there's not much you can do about it. I was at Hollywood Forever Cemetery talking with Arturo Vega at the Johnny Ramone Monument, and about 10 years back, or so, and actually 15, And he was saying, we were talking about that, and he says, you know what, Maggie, there's a point where you just have to understand that once your work goes out there, it becomes a product of the people. You can't go out and sue every single person. You just got to kind of accept it.
That it's out there.
Expect and accept, you know?
Yeah. It's a bummer way to look at it, but yeah, it's tough.
Like, no one really
costs
owns
so much to litigate.
Anything. You don't really own anything. You may think you do, but then when you die, whatever you own, I mean, this is, you know, not to get on that level with you, but it goes to somebody else.
I'm amazed. I know that we're sitting in a cemetery, but I'll tell you, every single podcast, it seems like, except for one so far, death is such a big influence on everybody's life because it comes up so often. Like the idea that we could die at any moment, right? So you better live in the moment, do your best now. It's crazy to me. Like the more of these interviews I have, that no matter what your background, that thought seems to be in everybody's mind. Right. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's the only thing that really is definite that we know.
Right.
You get one death, or
you get one life.
You know, or you get many deaths as we grow as people. You know, we shed some of our skin as past people, past lives, and then we get a new life. I don't know, man. I think about death all the time. It's always been something that I've been fascinated by and intrigued with the topic of. You know, I've always wanted to work at a cemetery. I remember being like 13 years old, going to Fairhaven Cemetery in Orange and saying, hey, you know, how do I get a job here? And they're looking at me like, okay, kid, you know, like, first of all, you're way too young and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, just death in general there's no way to escape it. You know, what do you do?
Can't do anything. You just live your life as best you can.
That's all you can
knowing
do.
That it will happen.
Like all of these people, think about this. Mm-hmm. All of these people that we are amongst, like we think we're the only people in this cemetery. For the most part, we are, you know. And I know they said that the gates were going to close at 5, but they never do. Don't worry about that. But we're sitting here with all of these people, every single one, Bell Braden, Vale, Fox, Weems, Whiting, Workman. Every single one of these people had a life. They have a birth date, 2006, and then there's a little hyphen in between that, and then they have a date of death. They live that whole entire life and didn't know that they weren't going to come home that night. They didn't know that
that was it.
That was it. And it's crazy to think about.
Is there one thing you want to do before you die? Absolutely.
You know, there's 2 answers to that. The first answer is, I am so grateful with everything I've done that if it was to happen right now, I think I would be okay with that. Like I have, you know, my kids are good. My kids are in a good spot. I think I would be okay. Then there's another part of me that just thinks like, there's still so much to do, you know, like there's still so much. Like I'm going to be 41 next month. And that is a crazy thought to think about.
Time moves so fast.
Right? My kids are going to be 18 next year. Like, how did that happen?
Right, in a blink of an eye. They say that. You don't believe it.
It's so
till
true.
It happens, yeah.
It's so true, yeah. I just think, man, like, time just goes by so fast. And it's the only thing we don't get back. It's like we were saying earlier, once it's spent, that's it. It's gone forever. Money comes and goes, but time is the only thing that we don't get back. Yeah, because, you know, it's like I've just had all these intense
good
synchronicities.
Right?
Yeah.
Happenstance is a good thing, though.
Yeah. A lot of really good synchronicities have happened. So,
Well, don't assume that that's going to lead to a negative thing.
Right. No.
Even though
no.
it is easy to do. Like, nah, you deserve those good things. And I'm sure they're coming because of things you've put in motion
Right.
over time. You know,
Right.
putting out that good energy.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's very positive and very uplifting and motivating and sincere and, genuine. And it feels really good. I feel like, maybe that's what it is. I feel like I'm finally at the right spot in my life. And that is probably what is a little scary. You know what I mean?
Things are going overwhelmingly well.
Yeah. That it's like, where's that jolt going to be? That's just going to kind of...
I know how you feel.
That's not going to happen, of course, but...
I know what I mean, though. Like, sometimes you get used to the other foot dropping eventually, and then if it doesn't come, you're like, what's up?
Right. Yeah, you kind of just expect, something tragic just to happen if you're used to it. You kind of get used to it, and it becomes something that you're... but that's, it's not right to think like that. It's only good to think and beneficial to think positively.
Yeah, but you can't help it. You're human. I get it. I'll say this, so I'm glad that things are going good for you and that things are synchronizing in a positive way, and I hope it keeps happening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Danny.
No problem.
And I hope this can all be edited into a positive...
Oh, it will be a very interesting
positive
episode,
outlook.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
It will be.
Thank you so much.
More than anything, it's very real, and I think that's more important.
Well, this has been a lot of fun,
I'm glad.
to come here, and I don't know, it just seems fitting to just
Right?
to be here.
Well, from Sunnyside Cemetery in beautiful Long Beach, California, where the sewer meets the sea.
Yes.
This is Walks of Life. Thanks,
Is.
Maggie.
Thank you, Danny.